We've even seen it where they're advertising in their sale decks or pitch decks upon putting a property on the market, how much of the rent roll is secured by Leap, which is, of course, investment grade insurance. And they talk about cap rates being, a little bit better because of X amount of the rent roll being secured.
Welcome to the Student Housing Insight Podcast, where we are putting you in touch with the people who bring student housing to life. I'm your host, Wesley Dees. I'm also the CEO and founder of Student Housing Insight. That's right. Student Housing Insight is not just a podcast, but Student Housing Insight is a platform for industry professionals to network, share data, develop best practices, all for operating student housing facilities. Go check us out at studenthousinginsight.com. We also produce the industry's monthly webinar that's focused on student housing operations. It's called Shop Talk, and it's led by a committee of C-suite and executive level industry veterans. So the content is always timely and relevant. If you want more information and want to register to receive notifications for those webinars, go to shoptalk.info. You can also go there and view past webinars as well if there's a topic that you want to get caught up on. Again, that's shoptalk.info. All right, well, let's get into today's episode. This is one of our special Behind the Biz episodes. If you haven't listened to one of these before, this is where I sit down with one of the great supplier or service providers to the student housing industry and do a deep dive on how they are impacting operations. Joining us today is Michael Davies, the Chief Operating Officer of Leap, a company that provides some very interesting solutions for student housing. Their rent guarantee policy is literally eliminating bad debt. And Michael will be sharing more about Leap's guarantee policy and how it's benefiting both landlords and students alike. So let's jump right into that conversation. Well, Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Wes. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I think the last time we probably saw each other was at Interface in Austin back in April. How has your summer been?
It's been busy. It's been really busy for Leap. Exciting year for us with first year with the new program rolled out to most of our operators. So it's been exciting. Can't wait to see how move-ins shake out here in the next couple of weeks.
Well, you and I have done one of these Behind the Biz episodes before. It was pretty much right as you guys were launching, and maybe you'd been in for a year, but it was certainly pre-pandemic. I've got to say, going back to, rewind the calendar to 2020, late spring of 2020. And of course, the industry has this weekly phone call that's happening, which, now has evolved into what Shop Talk is. But
right.
One of the questions that I heard somebody ask was about international students and, what was going to happen if they couldn't show up. And someone spoke up and said, well, I'm not worried about it because I've got Leap. And then everybody wanted to know what Leap was. And I think that turned out to be a good thing for you guys.
It was. I remember exactly that call, and my phone rang off the hook that week. So very grateful that call happened. And I think it was Julie Bonin that was the one who said that she was sleeping just fine at night. So thank you, Julie, if you're listening.
Well, for those that don't know, give us a little bit of the background on what problems Leap solves and what you guys are doing in the industry.
So Leap is an institutional cosigner of apartment leases all across the country. We got started in student housing in early 2019. That's when we first met Wes. And essentially what we do is we replace the need for a personal cosigner or security deposit or any sort of upfront rent, other ways of financially qualifying a student that properties may use all across the country. And what we do is we're an insurance company. So we provide rent guarantee insurance for for students and for properties all across the country. And our operators are able to choose a number of months of coverage that they would like by property or even by unit type. So let's say you have a property in the Southeast that you're not able to re-rent apartments very quickly, and you might want 7 to 12 months of coverage. We can certainly do that for you. And you may have a property in Michigan where you have a wait list, or you're able to re-rent apartments quickly after somebody turns or vacates, and you only want 3 or 4 months of coverage. So it's completely customizable. And essentially what we're doing is when that personal cosigner gets declined, or if they don't have a US-based cosigner, or if they're unable to come up with that prepaid rent, you can enroll them in our guarantor waiver program. And it's a monthly cost. It's actually added right to the resident ledger within whatever property management software our operators are using. And the student doesn't even know that Leap exists. So we're a B2B product now with our student housing clients. And then we just bill the property monthly for what they're charging back to the student on that ledger. So really, really simple. One of the things that I like to highlight is that we get rid of those pending applicants. So I know most of our properties, or the properties that, previous to utilizing our guarantor waiver program, would see anywhere from 30 or 40% at a time of applicants sitting in that pending file because they didn't have a way of financially qualifying. The parent had failed the qualification criteria, or mom or dad just didn't even want to cosign. And so now the properties that are using this program are able to clear out those pendings as they move along, very similar to forced place renters insurance. So at a certain point beyond the lease signing, if there's not another way of financially qualifying, as long as they're a student, they can go ahead and be enrolled in this program.
Well, fantastic. Prior to you guys coming onto the scene, because, there's, I don't know, 2 or 3 other kind of competitors that are keying in kind of what you guys are doing. I feel like you guys were really the first, but let's talk about kind of that origin story. How did you guys take this from idea to reality?
Sure. So our CEO, he had worked for another organization about 20 years ago that did something fairly similar, but they were localized to the New York City market. And it was kind of a buy or build approach. And it turned out that he ended up wanting to build his own model for this product. And we started out very similar. It was a New York, New Jersey based product, really geared towards international students and the barrier to entry that is getting into New York City. And, my background is in property management and real estate. And an old colleague had gone to a student housing company, given me a call and she was having issues leasing up a property in San Antonio, Texas. We went back to our insurance company and got licensed in Texas, built an underwriting model for student housing, and the rest is kind of history. And From there, we've really built a business around student housing itself and making sure that we get these students into an apartment home that they want to be in.
You mentioned having to get that license in Texas. Are you guys licensed across all 50 states?
We are, yes.
Okay. And I know we've got listeners in Canada, so
no Canada yet, but more to come on some international initiatives from Leap.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic. We've also got a lot in Australia and in the UK, so just so you know.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Well, hey, when it comes to Leap's experience in helping prospects qualify for apartments, what's really kind of surprised you the most in student housing?
So I would say the parents that don't want to cosign for their students, or families that don't want to cosign because they may be going through a life event. So think of the parent who's maybe trying to buy a new house or a new car, or maybe, something tragic happened. They lost a job or going through a divorce. We step in a lot for those families. It is such a point in time to get qualified for an apartment, make sure that the student isn't losing out. And so to not have to have your credit pulled, to not have to provide sensitive financial information is really a relief for a lot of families, across the country, especially when you're talking about an alternative that's only, let's say, $35 to $40 per month, and it is paid, monthly with the rent. We're seeing a lot of traction with those families who just don't want to cosign.
Yeah. I can't tell you, over the years how many, because when students are going into their apartments, they're typically 1 to 2 years into college, and it's amazed that how many parents end up, because of empty nest syndrome or whatever, the parents decide to split up. And that is one thing, a divorce like that. And then, your son or daughter coming to you and saying, hey, I need somebody to cosign. It's one of the most awkward things that I've had to deal with parents and guarantors, because there's a lot of things they don't want in that situation, obviously. And then, I mean, even if everything is fantastic and there's no life events or things there, I mean, just having that protection and not having to go to sleep at night thinking that, okay, if my kid flunks out of school next year, what am I going to do? So.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of things happening with local jurisdictions on the amount of security deposit that can be taken now. And that really exposes a property's risk, right? To more exposure if there's a no-show, or if the student ends up leaving, or they drop out of school after Christmas break and they end up, the operator only has 1 month of rent to fall back on. What do they do? So by having this insurance in place, just gives a lot of relief to the owners and operators that Leap works with.
Now, is there, because obviously security deposit alternatives have been out there forever, is there a portion of that policy that will go towards, actual physical damage of an apartment, or is there, an additional product that the residents can buy through Leap?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a standard damage coverage of $100, but our operators have the ability to increase their coverage at any given property. So if they wanted additional $1,000 in coverage per bed space, they can go ahead and opt in for that before we get a property set up. But we're also covering up to $1,000 towards legal costs. So if you do need to go through the eviction process with one of your residents that's covered by Leap, those costs are, of course, covered by us up to $1,000.
Gotcha. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the trends that you're seeing in student housing during your tenure, and what do you see on the horizon that you think will be the most important to students as far as in the relationship to that approval criteria?
For us, it's really about just driving awareness that these products are available. So even after graduation, let's say a student is moving to a larger city and the property is trying to charge, a month or 2 months security deposit because of a thin credit file. It's a big out-of-pocket expense. It's a huge barrier to entry to renting that first apartment before you have income from that first job. So for us, we're trying to drive awareness that this is available beyond college. And they may need that security deposit replacement product at the time of graduating. So for us, it's really important. The life cycle of the customer doesn't stop at graduation.
Gotcha. Do you see this expanding into, I don't want to say medical coverage, but, some type of accident insurance or anything like that? Or I think it's just going to be solely based on whatever's around the lease agreement?
For us right now, a lot of our relationship relies with the landlord. So we focus a lot on how we can drive value to our owners and operators that we work with. So anything from any other types of insurance or financial securing rent rolls and things like that are things that we are certainly open to and working on.
Great. So, outside of being able to get prospects approved that otherwise they may have a hard time approving them, I'm glad you mentioned everything with kind of the start of all of this happening in the New York area with international students, because, they bring no social security numbers or anything that we can check out. And so this is a perfect way for a landlord to rest assured that, because international students, they typically have to come into this country with a lot of money in a bank account in order to get here in the first place. And it's just documenting all of that that's really hard to do. And so this, works out perfect. And I've never met an international student who didn't appreciate it and they were quick to sign up for it. But besides helping those prospects get approved, are there other ways that Leap is helping property owners and managers?
Yeah, definitely. So we actually just had this spring, and one of our operators we work with for a long time, they were working with an ownership group that was acquiring a property. And this property, the previous management company had not really done a lot to qualify folks to live there for the upcoming school year.
Okay.
What they went ahead and did was, in order to get the deal done, they reached out to us to essentially provide insurance for all of these apartments that had been leased to without any sort of financial qualification for the upcoming school year and to even close out the last school year. So it was really kind of great for us and really exciting to be a part of that transaction, or what made that transaction happen, to give that ownership group the confidence that this asset was going to be protected and it was ultimately going to be a really great investment for them. And then we have on the flip side too, Wes, this is an interesting one where on dispos, obviously asset management teams all over the country are looking for ways to increase the value of their properties. And we've even seen it where they're advertising in their sale decks or pitch decks upon putting a property on the market, how much of the rent roll is secured by Leap, which is, of course, investment grade insurance. And they talk about cap rates being, a little bit better because of X amount of the rent roll being secured. So we are having more and more of those conversations as the market continues to improve a little bit, but also in making sure that if, depending on the economic climate, of course, that going into any sort of recession, coming out of any sort of recession, that their rent rolls are as protected as possible.
That's fantastic. Both of those situations in that transaction that you had the example of. So I want to make sure that I understand this right. So the management company was looking at an acquisition that one of their ownership groups were doing. Yeah, they had everything leased up, but it doesn't sound like maybe they did guarantor checks or anything like that.
Correct.
Maybe not even had guarantors. And so in order to get, obviously, their client comfortable with the purchase, they brought you guys in to basically custom, come up with a policy to cover both the current in place as well as the pre-lease.
Correct.
Is that correct? That is fantastic. Somebody may be listening to this now, and that's a perfect answer to something that they're trying to get over the finish line for a transaction. What does that process look like? What does the underwriting look like in order to make something happen?
It's pretty simple. The main thing that we're asking is really that student status is confirmed or self-reported there. So we work with the management company and the ownership group to confirm a few things. We'll also need to determine what sort of coverage that they would be most comfortable in taking out on these policies. And of course, how many bed spaces that's going to impact in order for us to come up with a quote for them.
Gotcha. And then on the other side of it, for someone who's getting ready for a disposition, that makes complete sense, because if you're in a situation where, I know of someone right now that the market that they're in, it's a very, very tight market, and the demographics of the university, there's a lot of first generation college students. And when you see that, there's always an attrition issue. And so this sounds like kind of a perfect thing where Leap could come in. They could bring Leap in, and regardless if the landlord's paying for it or if it's just a mandatory thing that they're making for all of their prospects, that really secures that, be it a 3-month or 6-month policy, that they can go and take that to a potential buyer and say, look, regardless if these people move in or don't, we've got Leap in place in order to make sure that you're covered through that first year.
Exactly. There's no show specific coverage as a part of our policy, which is limited to 3 months, typically to get our operators and owners through most of that first semester, or, and the ability to kind of backfill some of those apartments after the holiday break. And there's typically some more demand for move-ins. But beyond that, we're covering either up to the value of the lease or up to the sublimit that was chosen. Most operators are choosing around 7 months of coverage. It seems to be the sweet spot. But yeah, it really helps on the dispo to give a prospective buyer that level of confidence in the risk that they're taking on, similar to the acquisition approach. You have the person buying the property that's agreeing to buy the insurance up front because the qualification criteria wasn't fully in place before the sale was happening.
Now, I do want to make sure, I think there's a difference here between what I commonly refer to as a occupancy guarantee. So when someone goes under contract and they're looking at, maybe lease up is still happening. And, part of that contract could be, hey, for every lease that you're under 95% as the buyer, we want you guaranteeing that for the first year. So even if they hit 93%, there's a 2% gap there that they've got to make up. Your product isn't necessarily filling that gap for a goal that's missed or that they haven't realized. Yours is really if they got to 95%, but folks didn't move in, or, there were folks that ended up, moving out, whatever the situation is. That's what you're covering, not necessarily the occupancy guarantee.
Correct. With this product, there had to have been, an executed lease in place on the bed space because
Gotcha.
we're providing the insurance to the operator for that leased bed space.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, hey, that's really all the questions I had for you. I think this is a fantastic product. I'm not only someone that's interviewing you. I've also been a client, and you guys have been fantastic to work with through the process. But what are some of the things that your current clients are saying, and what's kind of the word on the street that you're hearing from everybody?
Sure. So, we're really proud this year. I think we'll represent just about 10% of all of our clients' bed spaces, just kind of at an overarching level where we take a lot of pride in helping our clients pre-lease a lot faster earlier in the season. Like I mentioned earlier, those pendings that are lingering out there really aren't the case anymore if you're using this program and you're giving your leasing teams the tools to close those leases faster. And our hope is, for our clients to be able to raise rents that much sooner in the season, maybe drop concessions in markets where they've had to offer concessions before, because those concessions aren't necessarily in place of a qualification criteria. So we've been able to get people to hit their goals a lot sooner in the season this year than any other school year. So we're really proud and excited about that.
Great. Well, we will make sure to put all of the contact information and everything in the show notes so folks can go there to link to you. But it is leapeasy.net. Is that the correct address?
It's leapeasy.com.
Leapeasy.com. And if they go to that website, is there the ability to fill out a form and get a quote, or is that something they contact you guys directly for?
There is a landlord form, but we welcome everybody to reach out to myself, Mike Davies, which email address is mdavies@leapeasy.com, or Marta Butler, who's our VP of Partnerships, and it is marta@leapeasy.com.
Everybody knows Marta.
They do.
You can't go to a conference and not hear Leap Easy and Marta not come up in the same sentence. So
we're really, really excited about all of the women's initiatives that she's been helping out and been a part of. We had the great opportunity to sponsor that happy hour this year on the rooftop.
Let's talk real quick about the scholarship program that you guys are doing too. I completely forgot about that, but we covered that a little bit leading up to Interface, but tell the folks a little bit about that as well.
Last fall, we ran a scholarship contest. It was an essay contest. LEAP does have a student housing advisory board, and that advisory board helped us with getting the essay questions taken care of, and as well as reviewing a lot of our finalist essays to determine our winners. So we issued five $5,000 scholarships to students across the country last year. And this year, we're making that scholarship program a bit bigger. We'll be launching that at the beginning of October. So encourage everybody to be on the lookout for what that looks like. We'll be reaching out to everybody who is a part of the LEAP program directly with the instructions on how to apply, but really excited to get this off the ground. I think it aligns really well with our ESG initiatives and our clients' ESG initiatives. And I know everybody at LEAP is always really excited and volunteering to read some of those submissions. And it's definitely a feel good for us here internally.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I think it goes a long way to show that how passionate you guys are about the student housing industry. I mean, yes, you can use your product kind of across the board in all of residential real estate, but this is something that really shows that you guys got your start here. You understand the student experience and everything else. And I really appreciate you guys stepping up like that.
It's definitely something that's really important to us internally. And each year we're looking to see how much bigger we can make it and how much better we can make it and involve as many industry folks as we possibly can. So
great. Well, we're coming up on the fall season. I know there's a lot of conferences and things that you guys will be attending. Is there anything in particular that maybe you guys are exhibiting now that you want people to know about?
We'll probably be at most of the conferences that everybody will be attending over the course of the next few months. I would just encourage you, if you have a property out there that's underperforming or needs those final leases, maybe you have a lot of pending applicants, please reach out. We can certainly implement something pretty quickly to make sure that you're hitting the ground running with as high of occupancy as possible going into this next school year, or hitting the ground running on pre-leasing for next season, because it's already starting.
Well, great. Well, Michael, I appreciate it. Tell everybody at Leap that I said hello and looking forward to seeing you guys this fall.
Always great to see you, Wes. Thanks so much for including us.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Again, a big thanks to Michael for joining us. I've been referring clients to them for several years now, and they are just fantastic to work with. Never had an issue with claims being processed. It's great for qualifying international students. And like I mentioned in that interview, parents are now just asking for this option versus having to co-sign or be a guarantor. So go definitely check them out and make sure that you schedule some time to speak with them if you have never looked at Leap before. Well, guys, that does it for this episode. If we have brought you any value, please recommend the podcast to your colleagues and rate us on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you have any questions for us, you'll find our contact info in the show notes. Also, make sure that you connect with us on LinkedIn. You can connect both with Student Housing Insight as well as myself, Wesley Dees. Guys, thanks so much and take care.